I wanted to preserve the history for future generations, for eccentricity reasons, from one eccentric to another. And it took an eccentric woman to buy this property and to see the beauty in it and to preserve it. I get dads coming by on push bikes with their kids, telling them about the mole man and telling them about the story. We became like rock stars, I think. Yeah, it took its toll on the both of us. It had a strain on the relationship. It just became really traumatic. But there's nothing like designing your own space. I just couldn't live in someone else's footprint. It's like I design the life I want to live, and I'm designing the space that I want to live in.
Hi, Sue.
Okay, hello.
Thanks so much for doing this. It's very exciting to be here in your house.
Okay.
And we're just to set the scene, we're in the basement, which is your studio space in your incredible house, which is known as the Mole House, and we'll come on to that later on. But I want to take you back first of all, because it's always really instructive to start at the beginning. You have, to my mind, created a couple of the most iconic modern houses in London. But where did you start in terms of home?
So my dad is an electrician. He's not alive anymore, but my dad was an electrician. His dad left home when he was very little. And this was, I guess, just after the Second World War. My dad was quite intelligent, but he just couldn't afford to go into further education because he had to leave home, get a job and support his mum, sort of thing, and the family. So there was all that sort of background, come from proper, inner city Leicester. Mm-hmm. And I guess growing up, my dad, he had bigger aspirations, but he was always, I think he resented the fact that he wasn't able to ever go into further education. His development as a human being was, I guess, his intellectual development was stunted by that. So I think he carried a chip around with him. So my dad had this thing where he was always trying to better the family situation. He had this fire inside of him because of his own restrictions growing up, and he wasn't able to do what he wanted to do. And so he was constantly trying to buy a house, get better, and then make some money, sell it, and then move into another neighbourhood. So I think by the time I came along, I was in not the same house that my sister was born in. We was in another one. So we'd moved out of the city centre and into a little village. So I went to a village school, and then my brother came along, and then my dad bought a plot of land in another part of Leicester and thought, I'm going to build a house on this. And so, it must have come from that, my need to that sort of thing. I don't know. So my dad asked my grandfather to build a timber-framed house. So they built which was quite revolutionary in the 70s, I think. Mm. So while they were saving the money to do this, we moved out of the house and we first lived in a block of flats. And one of my early memories was climbing a tree and jumping off a wall and I think knocking one of my teeth out. And then we went to save more money while my dad was trying to build this house. We moved into Caravan. So there was a mobile home on the plot of land where my mum and dad lived. And that was where the little kitchen was, and they had a bedroom in there. And then there was a plank of wood that joined it with a tiny caravan where the three kids, we used to sleep in the tiny caravan. And if you wanted to go to the toilet, we'd have to come out at night and walk the plank into the big caravan. I just remember it was fab because my sister had a transistor radio and we would just stay up all night, listening to, it must have been John Peel. And, it felt really illegal because the parents didn't know what time it was that we were going to bed. And, so listening to John Peel and listening to the really early, indie music, that his musical choice, his tastes, I guess, rubbed off on me, that weird sort of music that used to play. So we moved around quite a lot as my dad had aspirations for the family. So I was always the new girl at school. And I remember I found it quite difficult fitting in, because growing up, kids had gangs, didn't they? And, you know, I suddenly came into the clique a bit late. And it didn't help that we were living in Caravan at the time when we moved to the area where we sort of I lived the longest, if you like, before leaving home eventually and going to art school. So that was that when my dad built that house for us.
So living in a caravan, I mean, the obvious question is, were you able to find enough space for yourself? Because it's obviously quite intense because it's so tight.
Well, we had I think it was 1 acre of land, a plot of land that my dad bought.
Okay.
I really don't have much memories of that house being built, but I know my granddad did the timber frame. My dad obviously was the electrician, and he just got in friends to help build it, the brickwork on the outside. But the plot of land was right next to a park, and so I was really good at football. So I just took the ball, and next to us was lots of garages. So I just remember going out on my own, kicking the ball against garages, like all day. And then someone came along and said, "Do you want to come and play football on the park with us?" David Shackleton, I'll never forget him. So then I had some friends. But we were kind of known as the Jippos because we lived in the Caravan. But my dad was a massive Bob Dylan fan. And so he wanted to name the house, not give it a number.
Yeah.
And he named it Hard Rain after a Bob Dylan track.
Really?
But before we moved into the house, we had Hard Rain written on an A4 piece of paper in the window of the mobile home. So the postman would deliver our mail to Hard Rain, the Caravan, down the bottom of this cul-de-sac, which was next to the playing fields, where it wasn't restricting. No, I don't really think so. I never thought it was because, you know, we were little and we used to go out and play football.
Yeah. So have you got one sister or?
One sister, one brother.
One sister, one brother.
Older sister, younger brother.
Okay, so you're in the middle.
The problem child.
Is that
I always think
seriously?
Middle children always get a hard time, yeah. Because, like, you know, the firstborn is always the one that you're like, you treat with like kid gloves, don't you? Oh my God, parents never had a child before, so you go through that whole the thing. By the time the second one comes along, it's like, oh, just leave them to get on with it, really. And then the third one comes along, and it's like, oh, you've just reminded of how cute babies are again, aren't you?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So my brother was really, you know, and of course he was the boy, which obviously the two girls, and then it was the boy. So the novelty of having a boy, and and he was like, oh, the little Stuart. Oh, you know, he's not. He towers over me and Karen now. Yeah, he's the tallest.
So when you say that you're the problem child, is that, in all seriousness, was that how you sort of cast yourself, or was that how others cast you?
I just think that it's a well-known fact, isn't it, that there's a firstborn, secondborn theory, isn't there?
Yeah.
And the firstborns, Tim was a secondborn, and he's got an older brother. And it's kind of like, I always think, and it's really true, I've lived that. And firstborns are always, they like police you.
Yeah, sure.
You know, like we know the rules, we know the ropes, you know, and although my sister was a complete and utter, she was quite a tearaway anyway. I mean, she got pregnant in her teens.
Okay.
So, I mean, but she, you know, she's now, my mother and father aren't alive anymore, so she's the oldest of the family. Yeah, she's a bit like, what's she called? Polly out of Peaky Blinders. I have to remind her. Got to take that role on, Polly.
So where does your mum come into this picture then?
My mum's family, they ran a post office.
Yeah.
In Leicester, on the outskirts of Leicester. My granddad was a carpenter. My granddad built his own house out of wood. And he made patterns out of the wood. Like, it's incredible when I think back and I look at photographs of it. They didn't have any wallpaper. So he made wooden patterns made out of, and they were all geometric. So, I mean, my granddad was really strict. I think he was in the army and of Irish descent. So I just remember visiting them and going down into my granddad's workshop, and it just had that smell of wood and of like stuff that, preservative. And they had apple trees on their land. And so they were actually quite self-sufficient. Yeah. By the time I was born and brought up, they didn't run the post office anymore. They lived in their wooden house and grew their own food. It was incredible.
What was she like, your mum?
My mum worked in a factory. So again, didn't have an education. Didn't go to college or anything like that. So my mum worked in the hosiery factory. She was an overlocker. You know, hosiery, they make socks and stuff, don't they? Yeah, so she worked and then met my dad, and then that was that. So my mum was really like at home. She didn't have a career or anything, so she brought us up and took us around town. And so it was really me dad that I looked up to, not my mum. Growing up, and people used to say, I'm going to the theatre with my mum and all this sort of going out to dinner with my mum. I never had that. I used to really get bitter about it. I didn't have that relationship with my own mum. But on the other hand, I had that relationship with my dad instead. So my dad was really heavily into music. And so he would always have amazing record collection. He would always be playing Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen, and all the other singers, Joan Baez, stuff like that. And my dad would just go to concerts. I remember the Beatles. I mean, that was before my time, but the Beatles played Leicester, de Montfort Hall twice. And my dad went to see the Beatles, and my mum didn't want to go. So he took my auntie, and they made it into the Leicester Mercury. So there's this, it's in my crime scene. I've got this, my grandma always had this black and white photograph cut out of the newspaper on the fridge. And it was me dad and my auntie Sylvia. She had a leopard skin coat on, and they were in the audience when the Beatles played Leicester, de Montfort Hall in the 60s. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing. And my mum didn't want to go. And I was like, bloody typical. Missed out on a piece of cultural history. Yeah.
Yeah, I read something where you said something about your mum that you weren't sure about the way that she was looked after by a man. You said in an interview I read. So was there something about, I mean,
the power dynamics within the house?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how, you said you felt maybe more attached to your dad in some way. Did you think that she wasn't as independent as she could have been?
No, not at all. But then again, that was the 70s growing up. And I guess, that was just where I grew up. There were no female women that ran their own businesses. My dad eventually, he left the electrical company that was working for, and then set up on his own business. So he very much had bigger aspirations, set up his own business, eventually got his own workshop. And I used to work for him in the holidays. I had part-time jobs working for my dad. I used to love it. I used to love wiring. My dad used to work at the Findus fish factory in Grimsby in the freezer department. I mean, he got contracts. So he did, that was one of them. And he used to come home with car full of unidentified food without that had missed the labeling process.
Yeah.
Tins of this and frozen stuff that we used to put in the freezer, and it was like Russian roulette. Is it dog food? Is it human food? We don't know until it thaws out. So pretty much grown up on a diet of tinned and frozen food. And I still eat. I mean, my freezer is full of frozen food.
Yeah.
I mean, I still love frozen food. Yeah. Fish fingers, frozen, everything. Yeah. Love it.
That's fantastic.
But yeah, we had dodgy dinners. So yeah, because my mum was not a cook. No, but going back to your question, I think that was everyone's mum. You know, especially where in the world, the small little world, which we thought was the centre of the universe. I thought that was it. That was what mums did. Mums dragged the kids around the shops, and Dad met for lunch with their mums. We used to meet two grandmas in town, and they used to make sandwiches, and then we used to go meet in the cafe at British Home Stores or wherever. They'd order a pot of tea, and then my mum, I get this kick under the table, and she'd pass me a sandwich because they couldn't afford to buy food from the British Home Stores cafe. We got caught once, and it was awful. Couldn't go back again. Yeah.
So you've described a bit of sort of shape shifting that went on because you moved around a bit, and you briefly touched on it there that school wasn't always easier. So what was school like for you? Describe that. Did you feel like an outsider somehow?
Well, I mean, I guess because we moved about different areas of Leicester. I mean, never outside of Leicester, but from one end of Leicester to the other seemed like the end of the world. We'd left So everybody that I grew up with, I'd had to leave behind and move to the other side of Leicester. We were, I think, South Leicester, Wigston, and then we moved to North Leicester, which is near Loughborough. Where they, hey up, me duck, and I was like, hey up, what do you mean, hey up? It was quite funny. Mum and Dad used to call each other duck. I was like, and then us chick, and it was like really weird. But and so you had to join a new school. That's right. And then everybody had already grew up by the time they were 10. They'd been like together and whatever. And so you were like, we were the jippos that came to school. My sister fitted in better than me because she smoked. Mm-hmm. That was the difference. Yeah. You were a bit like harder, considered a little bit tougher.
Why didn't you?
I just never had never
got into it.
No, never smoked. Did you?
I did a long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, I just it was one of them things. It just never appealed to me, smoking. No.
Yeah. So how did that manifest itself then? You like feeling like you weren't fitting in. What, did you get bullied or what was it like?
Well, I was the only one that got my mum's black hair. So I had long black hair and thick black eyebrows that joined in the middle. So then and it was mainly boys called me a witch because of the eyebrows. So I'd wander around the school playground, it was weird. It's like everyone had made their group sort of thing, their friends. And so I would just be the one wandering around with the other person that no one wanted to talk to, kind of thing. And you'd be sitting on your own at lunchtime and stuff like that. And I'd try and find my sister. And my sister would inevitably be behind the bike sheds with a fag. And I go, so-and-so's calling me names or something like that. And she'd come marching out, with her gang. Don't you ever speak to my effing sister like that, So I'd always run to my sister for help. She fitted in, easier than me. And you don't want to keep running to your sister. So then I started pretending to be ill so that I'd go home.
Okay.
So I didn't want to go to school. I'd either pretend to be ill so that I didn't have to go to school, or I'd just end up at the headmistress's office and wait for my mum to pick me up or something like that to go home, back to Caravan. Yeah. So it became a thing where I just didn't want to go to school. Yeah. So
I think you were 13, weren't you, when you were taken into psychiatric care? Is that right?
Yeah. 13 or 14, I can't remember. But so it kind of, the thing is, I pretended to be ill and then eventually I became ill. It's that weird thing where I made myself ill. I think I actually made myself really ill. Yeah. And it did something to my head and it just manifested itself into a proper illness, a psychiatric illness, if you like. And it became very dangerous. And so I had to be taken away from I had to go and see a psychiatrist when I was little, which was awful. It's not like now where people admit to all that stuff and it's cool and trendy. I'm in therapy and all that, later in life, everybody's got a bloody therapist. But then it was it was a shame. I was ashamed of it. I had to be taken out of school and I couldn't tell anyone what was happening. And I had to go, and then my mum would take me to see the psychiatrist and then I didn't know, I was too embarrassed to talk about my feelings, because I wasn't brought up like that and I was too young to, so I used to sit in silence. Of course, then it was made matters worse because I wasn't conforming, if you like. And then I was put on medication, which was even worse. Then I'd fall asleep at school. So the whole thing just spiraled into this terrible thing, and it got worse. So I got taken out of school and put into psychiatric care with a load of nutters.
I mean, it's so tough, Sue, because it's so young, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's so, looking back,
because you didn't know what was going on, you didn't know how to get out of it, and I felt like I'd almost brought it on myself because I was not wanting to go to school, so I was faking illnesses, and then eventually eventually it became a real illness. Yeah, I went down a sort of dark hole. Yeah.
I find that so interesting, though, that you've taken it on yourself, haven't you? You're sort of implying that it was something that you manifested or that it was your fault somehow.
Yeah. But where did it come from? Because people say, what's the matter? When you talk to a psychiatrist or your parents parents actually my dad got very, very frustrated because he couldn't get to the bottom of it, what was making me ill, sort of thing, because it was almost like there was no answer. I couldn't give an answer. I still can't, sort of thing. But I guess looking back at it, I can only sort of think of it as being feeling very isolated, I suppose, and feeling not accepted and not wanted. I mean, it's very much wanted at home, but I think school could be quite, people can be quite evil. Yeah. I sensed that a lot growing up, I used to carry stones in my pocket that I could rub to give me a bit of strength,
Wow.
sort of like I used to carry stones around with me. So if I felt odd, I'd just rub the stones to give me some sort, I guess people wear crystals and stuff like that, don't they?
Yeah.
But I used to sense it when I was much older that people gave off a bad aura. I could sense it, and I thought, I don't want to go near them. I don't want to be in the same room as that. I started sensing this sort of like, really weird. And you had to avoid people. Because people can be quite cruel. Yeah. And maybe not even intentionally, just, especially if they're in a gang,
So it sounds like that culturally and within your family and that time in general, you would have felt a real sense of shame. Did you feel that? Did you feel like there was something, you were broken in some way?
Not at the time, no. I just didn't know what was happening, really, to me. And also, when you were being put on medication, the medication was supposed to be there to help you, but they give you sort of downers, and they, if you like, sleeping pills as well. I was on sleeping pills, and they get the bloody doses wrong. I couldn't wake up in the morning. I have to go to school and fall asleep in the lesson. Then I get told off by the teachers. Teachers weren't aware of what was happening, sort of thing. So then they just thought that I was being naughty. It's one of them. It just spirals, doesn't it? And you can't tell them because you're too embarrassed, sort of thing, to tell them what's happening to you. I couldn't tell them that I was seeing a psychiatrist. I mean, it's just too embarrassing. It's too, I don't know. I think my dad had to write a letter in the end and tell the teacher, and then that was okay, because it always used to happen in double chemistry. So the teacher just thought I was skiving off.
Okay.
I didn't realise that. So I got into trouble at school because I couldn't tell them what was happening.
Oh, I see.
Eventually, yeah.
That's so hard.
Yeah.
Where does art come into this?
as a saviour. Well, I always drew. Yeah. I mean, there was something that I was always good at, drawing. Just always drew. But again, didn't know that there was ever going to be a end result there. Like I say, I love playing football, but that wasn't allowed. Wasn't allowed to play football at school because that was for the boys.
Really?
Yeah. Not until now, where it's now encouraged, isn't it? But I just couldn't understand why I wasn't allowed to be in the boys' team, because I was as good as they were. I loved playing football. It was a thing that I enjoyed. And then when I was at school and the boys were outside playing football, and I was like, why can't I go out and play football? And they're like, no, the girls got to stay in and learn to sew. And I was like, that's not fair. I remember actually saying that to the teachers, that's not fair. But of course, they're the rules. The girls had to stay in, boys were allowed to go and play outside. And we had to learn to be homekeepers, fucking learn to sew. Or cook. I mean, It's awful, isn't it, when you think about it nowadays?
Yeah, it's staggering, really.
There's an England women's team and they're bloody brilliant, and I just think, wow, so that was another kind of blockage. It's like, I'm not allowed to do what I want to do. I'm not allowed to play football, or rugby. I love playing rugby as well. I wasn't encouraged to do art. I remember doing this drawing and my dad not commenting on it because I don't think he knew how to. It wasn't a thing. We weren't taken to galleries growing up. It wasn't on the agenda. We were taken to football matches.
Okay.
Which was great, and concerts. So music was a big thing. My dad, like I said, big Leonard Cohen, big Bob Dylan fan. So I saw Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen when I was very young.
Well, on music then, let's talk about punk rock.
Yeah.
Because this was a big thing for you, wasn't it?
I mean, my sister was into the Bay City Rollers. I mean, I was luckily never subscribed to any of that shit because I was too young, right? I remember seeing a picture of Susie Quattro, or I might have even seen Susie Quattro on Tiswas or something like that, and thinking, wow, there's a woman in an all-in-one leather jumpsuit with a guitar, and she's called Susie, and I'm called Sue, right? So that's all right.
Well, so speaking of people that are almost called Sue. So it was Susie and the Banshees, wasn't it, that really captured you,
Well, I think
right?
that was a band. So Susie Sue was like my idea of what my mother should look like.
Yeah.
Jet black hair, cropped, hair that was black already and then dyed even blacker. Like I said, I adopted my mum's jet black hair, and my sister had a mousy brown and my brother was blonde. So I had the black genes, thank God. And so when I first set eyes on Susie Sue, it was in the pages of the NME, and it was like crop black hair and Cleopatra style makeup, and just wearing almost like underwear, like a bra on the outside of your clothes, and thigh high patent leather boots with a killer heel, on stage, strutting her stuff. It was just like it was like someone had broke the fourth wall down for me. And I just became obsessed. And I was also, when I was institutionalized, so I came out first time and then I was home for a bit, and then had to go back into another hospital away from home. And I used to, in Cambridge, and I used to, when I was allowed out, just walk around the record shops. And my first T-shirt I bought was Susie and the Banshees T-shirt. I thought, when I get out, I was like I had the Banshees T-shirt and the headband. And so it kind of became a bit of a saviour, really, she did. I kind of aspired to that look, to that attitude. And she was a strong female figure. And I hadn't got a strong female figure in my life, because I guess my mother was she was a homemaker. And my dad had the command of the house, sort of thing. So it was quite a revelation to see that women were allowed to be outspoken and front a band, be in front of a band with the men behind.
Yeah.
And so I just became when I came out of the Adam Brooks Hospital, it just became the thing that I latched onto to pull me through. And I just became completely and utterly obsessed by the band. And if they were, VHS, we had a VHS video recorder at home. And if Susie the Banshees ever appeared, you get wind that that was probably in the newspaper. Susie's going to be on Top of the Pops. Susie's going to be on this. I'd just press record, and I would record everything on VHS tape. So I had this show reel of Susie the Banshees, and I would spend all my money on buying their records, and when I got old enough, seeing them live as many times as possible. And so it just became this obsession. And I used to go on I used to persuade people from school to come with me to see the band. I remember the first time I saw them in 1983. It was at the Royal Albert Hall, and it was £6. And I persuaded Jason Thompson to come with me, who was in love with me, and he shaved his hair into a Mohican. And we paid £6 for those tickets, and it was £6 to get the coach there and back from Leicester. I mean, wow, it was amazing. I've still got the concert ticket. I've actually still got the bus ticket as well.
How do you? I love that.
Because, this is for me, but I could never understand why people wouldn't keep these things. This was this meant something. I'd blue tack them on the bedroom wall, all my concert tickets, but you blue tack them to the wall, next to the posters, next to your records. These were my trophies. These were my I made it all the way to London and back, and it was £6. Can't believe it.
I want to take you to art college now.
Yes.
On the first day there, I believe.
Yes.
You met a guy called Tim Noble.
Exactly.
Tell us about that.
I was actually in Europe. Going to art school and doing a degree was something that was never, ever mentioned in my household, because nobody had ever done it before. My mum and dad hadn't done it. My older sister didn't leave home and go into further education. So it was my art teacher that encouraged me to stay on and do A-levels, because I was going to leave school and get a job, in advertising, because I really like advertising. I like logos and things. So I was going to get a job, right at the bottom of I don't know. I think I got a couple of job interviews, and my art teacher was like, well, I think I was 16, and she was like, well, we thought about staying on and do A-levels. And so I did. So I stayed on to do A-levels. And that in itself was like, you can do art all day, not just one of the lessons. Or, you have a day and then you do double art, or you do art for 3 hours in the week or something. But to actually, I remember that massive leap of being able to go into the art class at school all day. It was just amazing. Wow, I can just do art all day. I did A-level art and A-level design. And then my portfolio was, my teacher said, well, why don't you apply to go to, do a degree? And I was like, I don't know what that is. And so she encouraged me to send my portfolio off. I did a foundation course. So I got into foundation at Leicester Polytechnic. And they said your portfolio is good enough that you can go straight to do a degree. But I didn't want to, because I didn't know what I wanted to do a degree in. So the foundation course in Leicester Poly was fantastic, because you can do a few weeks of design, a few weeks of fashion, a few weeks of building things. And I thought I was going to end up being a graphic designer. I wanted to do record sleeves or something like that, because that was the only thing that I could think of. But my tutors said, well, you actually you should apply to do a degree in fine art. And I had no idea what that meant, because I was really good at like drawing and painting. So I applied to do a degree in fine art. I didn't want to go to London. I didn't know London. I had no family in London. I had no friends in London. So I applied to go to art school in Nottingham, because Nottingham was the next town from Leicester. And I knew Nottingham because I used to go and see bands there. Mm-hmm. So I applied to do fine art at Nottingham Polytechnic. I remember putting my canvases in the back of my dad's Datsun estate and driving, because I passed my driving test at this point. And I put my huge canvases in the back of my dad's estate and walked into my interview with all my canvases propped up. I mean, you wouldn't do that now because everything's online, isn't it? But I remember like coming out, unloading the car, walking into my interview with I got a place at Nottingham Poly. Yeah. And when we had to go and enroll, I was a day late because I'd been in Europe watching Susie the Banshees on tour.
Of course.
So I went with a boyfriend at the time, and we went to Amsterdam, Brussels, and Bonn in Germany. We never made it to Bonn because we got wasted on space cookies in Amsterdam. And then I missed my ferry back. So I got back a day late. And so I was a day late enrolling. Everyone else had enrolled, apart from one boy that was lurking in the corridors of Nottingham Polytechnic with tight black curly hair, and that was Tim. Yeah. So weirdly, I have no idea why he was late, because he's just one of them people that's always late. And we just met, and that was that. And then we met, and then I had to go into the principal's office, and so did he. And then we both went for a coffee. And I said, "Oh, I'm not staying here for long because I've applied to be I've applied for a job to go on the Tube music program." Because in the back pages of the NME, Paula Yates had got pregnant.
Yeah.
And they were looking for a replacement. And so I sent off for the job, and I got shortlisted. So I'd been up to Newcastle for an interview.
Wow.
Tyne's television. And I got shortlisted down to the last 6. And I thought, that's it. I'm not staying at art school. I'm going off because I never wanted to be an artist. I mean, there was no future in that. I was going to go into music in some way. Yeah. So I was going to be a TV presenter. And so I didn't give a shit about being at art school. I was going off. And then I didn't get the job. Someone called Felix, as a little boy, got the job.
Oh, Felix.
And they were filling in for Paula Yates. Anyway, it was interesting. It was an interesting journey. And then I had to return back to art school with my tail between my legs and go, oh, that's it now for the next 3 years. So, I started off as a painter in art school. But in the holidays, I'd gone to WOMAD festival to see Susie and the Banshees and took some really strong drugs. I took a microdot, which is much stronger than LSD. And it blew my brains out. And I saw every molecule in the atmosphere. And I went on this incredible 14-hour trip where the ground swallowed me up. and snakes were crawling up my legs. My shoelaces turned into snakes and they were wrapping around my legs. And I saw a tree and it had apples in it, and every apple was Michael Jackson throughout his entire, every single incarnation of Michael Jackson throughout his career. And they're all talking to me. And I went on this trip. And when I went back to art school, I said, I don't want to paint anyone, I make sculpture. So I saw everything three-dimensionally. It was that was the thing that did it, taking acid.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So I started making sculpture. So I said, I want to move down to the sculpture department. And so so at this point, they'd already allocated everybody their spaces. You know, like you get a little space with a curtain on it, don't you? A little partitioned painting studio. And they took me down to the sculpture room, and there was no room because like they'd already filled up the spaces. And so, apart from this giant room with a door on it that was like the size of this, maybe a bit bigger than that, and they said, well, we've got this space here and it's got a door with a lock on it. I said, that would do. So I had this studio to myself, and it was huge. And I could lock the door and avoid all the tutorials. So when I knew anyone was coming round, I'd just lock the door, switch off the music and pretend I wasn't in. So I didn't have any tutorials. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And also Tim himself also followed me down into the sculpture school.
Okay.
He was a painter as well. So he came down straight after me, and they said, well, there really isn't any space left. So he had a curtain under the stairs. So they put him under the stairs. And I got a whole fucking room to myself with a door that locked, and he was under the stairs. And I always remember that he used to buy fish from the fishmongers, and then he was really into casting things. His father was an artist, and he used to cast things. So he knew how to do it all. So he used to cast the fish and then take the fish home and eat it for dinner, which I thought was disgusting. But we got into working with found objects pretty much immediately, because when you were at art school, they had an art cupboard of materials. So you'd go in, and then there were like sheets of steel and lumps of clay, and you go in and you have to sign your little thingy and you get your allocated material allocation, if you like. And I just thought, I don't want to do what everyone else is doing, getting the same bloody chunk of metal out and welding it together, or lump of clay. And so Tim and I just went out and got shopping trolleys and used to go around the streets of Nottingham and collect trash and bring it back to the sculpture school and weld it all together, because we learnt how to weld and braze. And it's a great education. I learnt how to use all the power tools. You know, you go on the welding course and you'd do all that. And so we just used to bring back, I was very much into Americana and custom cars, customization and stuff. I don't know if it was anything to do with the acid trip, but I was mad about custom cars. And I never used to go to art galleries. I used to go to custom car rallies. And see like cars that have been like fucked up, and they got neon lights underneath them, and they've been pumped up, and they were like, and they drive them and then they drop, and they do these put on shows, and like they'd have all these like pneumatics in them, and the cars would do this and that, almost like they'd break dance.
Yeah.
And we'd go to Santa Pod, and I just got, and they'd chrome the engine. I was obsessed by that, so I used to collect a lot of chrome, like exhaust pipes and stuff, and then weld them onto domestic appliances. Like I used to try and track down scrap yards that had old 50s and 60s fridges and cookers, and then customize them with exhaust pipes and make these like amazing fuck-off things. Yeah, I used to do flashing lights and lots of chrome. And Tim was very much into the work of Jean. He used to have got taken, the complete opposite to me, he got taken around art galleries by his artist parents. And so he was very much influenced by the work of Jean Tinguely. And so he got into making things that moved, kinetic sculpture, if you like. So his degree show was very much about kinetics and taxidermy. He'd make things fly, crows fly and things. And I was very much into flashing lights and welding junk together. And I was into customization. So we had these 2 quite incredible degree shows. Yeah. And then when we left, when it came to what we're going to do next, somebody came that was starting out like an artist studios up in Bradford in Yorkshire, and said, I'll give you both a free studio. So it was like fantastic. We kind of really had to survive. So we had to get jobs doing building stuff for stage sets, pop videos and whatever like that. We got quite good at it. But Tim's brother was down in London. He's also an artist, and he was at the Royal Academy, and he was like what he called a proper artist, not like us, who were messing around artists. You know, he was very sure about that. You know, he was a proper artist, and he just sent word up and said, someone's put a shark in a tank and called it art. And we were like, what? Let's go down and see it. So we travelled down from Bradford to London to the Saatchi Gallery on Boundary Road, I think it was, in Swiss Cottage, that one. And I just had my mind blown, because I'd never been into a white space with just one object in it. It was just, the walls were white, the floor was white, and there was nothing on the walls. And it was just like this shark in a tank. And I remember it being one of those defining moments where it just like was that shock to the system. It scared the shit out of me. Not the possibility of coming face to face with something that could eat me, but more the boundaries of art were down, and anything could be art. There was like, what you're doing, painting bloody pictures and putting them on the wall. It was like there was endless possibilities of what art could be then, because this conceptual art thing had come in to the picture of something that I'd never been aware of. Conceptual art, didn't know what it was. I was afraid of it. And I got introduced to conceptual art, and it was this whole YBA movement thing that was happening in London. And I just thought, what the fuck are we doing messing around in the north? And I'd never even thought about being a part of this thing. It scared me enough to go, I need to go down and see what this is, see what's going on. So we moved 200 miles from Bradford down to London. Didn't know anyone down there. Tim had 2 friends. So one was in Clapham, one was in Notting Hill Gate. And we slept on their floor until we found ourselves a flat. And cleverly, I realised that if we'd applied to go to art school to do an MA, we'd get a free studio and maybe some subsidised living space. So previous to that, I said to Tim, look, we're not going to survive in London. We ain't got 2 pennies to rub together. Let's apply to go to do an MA. And so we applied separately. We made separate bodies of work. And Tim got I didn't get an interview. He did. He got an interview at the Royal College of Art. And they gave him a place at doing sculpture at the Royal College of Art. And so for me, I didn't care. I just thought, brilliant, got a free studio now in central London and subsidised accommodation. So we found ourselves a flat that was subsidised in a block of flats above Clapham South Tube Station. Tiny thing. And we gave up the bedroom, and lived in one room and made the bedroom into a studio, a tiny studio. And then Tim, he enrolled at sculpture schools in Battersea. And I just thought, well, I'm not going to sit at home all day. So give me a card. You can tap on the door to get in. And I just invited myself up to Kensington Gore, Royal College of Art, while he was in Battersea. And I used the pass, and then I just went in.
Really?
And just started wandering around the art departments, using all the facilities.
You start working there?
Yeah, for 2 years. And
did anyone question you on that?
No, not really. I got a pass. And it wasn't until, and I even got a job in the art shop as well, selling art materials. And I used to print T-shirts in the printing department, sell them in the art shop. And a few people got wind of it. I even got invited onto a school trip from the printmaking department to go to New York, and said, Tim, do you want to come with me? I've been invited to go to New York with the printmaking department. And it wasn't until graduation day at the Royal Albert Hall, Tim turned up in a cap and gown and I didn't. And they were like, "Oh, you're being really radical. You're not graduating." And I was like, "Well, I'm actually not a student." So it wasn't until graduation day 2 years later that they cottoned on that I wasn't actually meant to be there.
Good for you. That's fantastic. So I'm going to fast forward, Sue, to back to the home, but to a very well-known house that you and Tim created together, called the Dirty House, with the architect David Adjaye in Shoreditch. And people will know this building because it's a very prominent, well-known building on Chance Street. And you had it all painted black, and it's got mirrored flush windows on it. It's an incredible building, and it's been there a long, long time now. Just tell me about that place, the genesis of it, and what it was like to live there initially.
Well, first of all, it's not painted black. So it's a very dark brown.
Right.
Ghanaian brown.
Okay.
David wanted to paint it yellow, like sand.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not going to live in a bloody yellow house, mate. So he said, well, we'll paint it it was like Gucci brown.
Yeah. It's very black brown, though.
Yeah. Well, all the copycat houses all the copycat buildings in Shoreditch that went black.
Yeah.
I didn't get it. It was actually a really, really dark shade of brown.
Yeah.
How did that come about? Well, fast forward a few years, we moved to London, and then we started working together, and we hit the right moment, if you like, where we were showing our work and we got picked up by galleries and we became very successful. And we earned a lot of money very quickly. And I'd never had any money before. I was terrified. We started making these intricate abstract sculptures that when you shone a light on it, they made self-portraits of me and Tim.
Yeah, just to put some colour on that, people that don't know, they're absolutely ingenious, those, but they're basically found objects, aren't they, that you assemble together.
Yeah.
And then when you shine a light on them, they project onto the wall an incredibly accurate depiction usually of you and Tim or whatever it was.
Well, mainly of me and Tim, I mean, collectors at the time started wanting us to do their portraits, Andy Warhol style, and we refused to do anyone's portrait other than... The only other person we did was Isabella Blow.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and that ended up in the National Portrait Gallery.
Oh, really?
So the only other portrait and we got asked by a lot of famous people, and we were like, I can't go down that Andy Warhol. I mean, we could have still been doing them. We would have made loads more money probably, but we refused to do it. So the first portrait we made of each other were made up of the stuff that you throw into a drawer, a broken pair of sunglasses or a badge that's lost its pin, and you just can't throw them away. So we both had these like drawers or boxes full of shit, and so we just glued them together. So I'm made up of all the bits that were... The first one was made up of me, and the other one was made up of Tim's things. You shone it, and we were really embarrassed by this thing because we didn't even know if it was art.
Yeah. So
we were very shy of showing it. And before we had a gallery, we had a space on Rivington Street in Shoreditch, which was the old Sterling Ackroyd office, actually. And we lived on the top floor, and we had an office in the middle and a studio on the basement. So we did our very first show in that building. And we were making light sculptures with flashing lights, which were very popular. And so we did a giant love heart with a dagger running through it on the ground floor, an electric fountain made of lights that flowed like water on the middle floor. And then on the top floor, we put this thing we glued together. When you shone a light on it, it made a shadow. And we were a bit embarrassed by it because we didn't know quite what it was. And it was, if you walked up to it, it looked like a pile of rubbish. But when you crossed, there was a projector on the floor that had a sensor on it. So when you walked in front of it, poof, the light came on. And you could actually hear people gasp like that when they saw that the projection made these portraits on the wall. And that was the Charles Saatchi moment. Charles Saatchi turned up. It was to our studio, really, because in them days, people put shows on in derelict warehouses, and we just happened to have a nice little shop, if you like, on Rivington Street. And nobody came to Shoreditch in them days. And a taxi pulled up with the engine still running. It's like, don't go, because I'll never get a taxi back. And it was Charles Saatchi walks in with his little daughter, Phoebe. And, and we hid behind the wall. We never spoke to him. But there was a number to ring. and on the invite. And so when the taxi left, he rang the number and he bought 2 pieces. And so that was the Saatchi moment. But anyway, so fast forward, we met Stuart Shaver and started working with him, where we formed the Gallery Modern Art together. We started making a ton of money. I didn't know what to do with it. I said, Stuart, hold on to that money and just pay us 60 quid a week, because that's how much the dole was. At the time, we were signing on before we were making any money. And so I said, just keep paying us 60 quid a week. I know what to do with 60 quid a week. I don't know what to do with all these other hundreds of thousands of pounds that were, until I saw a building on our way to Modern Art one day. And it was for sale, and it was like a derelict box. It was a square box. Didn't have a pointy roof. It was a flat box. And I just loved it. And I think they wanted £500,000 for it. And I had in the bank £250,000. And I asked this older man that I used to see at art openings, I said, how'd you get a mortgage? I had no idea. And he said, normally you put a 10% deposit down and the bank will give you the rest. I said, well, I've got a 50% deposit. And so I went to my bank, Lloyd's at the time, High Street Bank, and I said, I've got this building, I want to buy it, I've got half the money. And they did the old computer says no, tapped it in. I was like, what are you talking about? I was told if I had 10%, you'd give me the rest. But I didn't have any accounts. I couldn't, it was all wrong. But I wanted to buy this building. And so then I went to someone that was rich. No, I went to my dad first and I said, Dad, can you lend me some money? And my dad said, if I sold my house, I wouldn't have enough money. I said, I want to give you the money, but if I remortgage my house, it wouldn't be enough. And so the richest person I knew was Detmar Blow, who was back in modern art at the time. And I said, Detmar, can you lend me some money? And he couldn't, and because he got his money tied up. And so his sister was married to a doctor who happened to have the amount of money that I needed. And so I loaned it off him to buy so we loaned the rest of the money to put with our money. And the minute you buy a property, everything changes then. All the banks want to know you. Do you know what I mean? Then we got a mortgage because I owned a property, and it was that building.
So how did the house change things for you in terms of your work? I mean, did the house inspire the work, do you think?
Well, I always lived in fear of being kicked out.
Yeah.
Of rents going up or landlords, and I just thought, well, for security, I just wanted to buy my own property.
Yeah.
And there was not a lot of people doing that at the time. But I knew that once I got my own building, and my first thought was, I want the right space to work in. Living was secondary to that. There was no living space. We'd met David Adjaye. He was a student at the Royal College of Art, and we always used to joke. And he was in partnership with Will Russell.
Oh yeah.
So it was Adjaye and Russell, I think. They were working together. And I used to joke to David that if we ever have enough money, I'd get you to do a building for us. We used to joke about it, and then of course it came true. So he's the first person I turned to when I bought this. Before I bought the property, it's had pillars holding up the next floor. I thought, I can't work in this building that's got pillars. Can you get rid of them? I brought him round. I said, can you get rid of them pillars? And he says, oh yeah, we'll just gut the building and we'll pin it from the 4 corners and we'll get rid of the pillars. And I said, great, I'll buy the building. And that was that. And it was David. I took David round and said, that was that. And we do the job. We did that project for like 300 grand in 9 months. Tim and I were still working in the building because we were working on a big show at Gagosian for Gagosian LA. And we were using the studio as Derelict, but it was a massive fuck-off space, and we were building our work in this derelict building. And we'd bought it, but then we had to raise the money to do it up. So literally the building was being done up as we were selling work. We were raising a bit more money to do the kitchen, a bit more money to do the bathroom. So we were just bankrolling it ourselves on the back of that show. There's not much to it, really. I mean, David, it's radical. It looks completely radical. We had nowhere to live, so we had to apply for planning permission to build the penthouse on the top. So we had this fuck-off penthouse, which was the size of the building. It was huge.
Yeah, it's great. It's like the roof is sort of lifted like a lid almost that's coming off the top.
Yeah, and it was very much like living in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Although I'd never lived in Los Angeles, that's what it felt like, because all we could see was blue sky.
Yeah.
Because Shoreditch was not built up like it is now.
Yeah.
You looked off that balcony and you could see above what beyond what is now Shoreditch High Street Overground and all those buildings that have been built since.
Did you have a Richard Woods floor up there?
Yeah,
Oh, you
so
did,
Richard
didn't you?
Woods was also an artist working with Stewart at the time. And so I think we did a deal with him to do the floor. So it was a custom made Richard Woods floor. Yeah. So, once you got a bit of money, I bought a Gary Hume rug. You just did it. We did it gradually.
Yeah.
It was a massive empty space. It was all about the studio.
Yeah.
The living space was very bare to start with.
Yeah.
And then we bought furniture as we needed it.
How many years were you there for?
We moved in 2001 and I moved out in 2018. So I was there for just about 17 years. Yeah.
Okay, wow, that's a long time. So that saw a lot, that house. And then, latterly, the two of you separated.
Yeah. If I could have kept that house and I could have airlifted it up, I could have picked it up and put it somewhere else. I think Shoreditch just became unbearable to live in.
Did
just
it?
became, and it was our fault. I mean, really, because of us, because of artists and because of that landmark building. And they then built Shoreditch House and then they built the Overground and then it just became this popular area. It was derelict. It was a derelict part of London, Shoreditch was.
Yeah.
No one wanted to go there. Even our friends didn't want to come and visit us. They thought they'd come out and their wheels would be missing. The car would be propped up on bricks. Literally, really, yeah.
So you've described the breakdown of your marriage almost like a death, is what you said. I mean, just tell me about that. What was that period like?
I think just living and working together we met when we were on the first day of art school, and we were inseparable. I mean, we spent very little time apart. We ended up working together. We lived together, and it was the living in and we were like. It's not that we finished each other's sentences, but we had such an intuition about working together, whereas we really didn't. We trusted each other so much, and then it just became that thing where the rock and roll lifestyle I think got in the way, and there was a lot of temptations, especially in Shoreditch at the time. We became like rock stars. Rock stars have a lot of groupies.
Yeah, a lot of groupies, did you?
So art became massive.
Yeah,
artists became the new rock stars. Hanging out in the Groucho Club, being invited to all the parties. And it literally, it just became, we became like rock stars, I think. And it took its toll on the both of us. It had a strain on the relationship. Yeah. It just became really traumatic. Couldn't live with it. I remember throwing everything of his off the balcony.
So you've talked about coming out of that period.
It was a death, yeah, and I mourned that death. It was because he was like another limb. It was like losing a limb, really, and it was more traumatic than losing both my parents because I'd been with him longer than I'd been with my parents. I'd left home when I was probably 19 and met him and did all my growing up together, and I'd been with him for 20-something years, 25 years maybe, I think. So, yeah, I'd live with him longer than I'd live with my parents. So it was a very hard thing to break through to the other side.
Yeah. So you left, and where did you go?
I had a friend that lived in this, he's a chef called Mark Hicks, and he used to live in this posh bit of London called de Beauvoir that I'd never heard of. And so we used to go and visit him for Christmas on Christmas Day often. He lived in this proper house with a garden and I'd never seen anything like it. And it was all comfortable. I'd lived in warehouses, caravans, flats and stuff. I hadn't really lived in a proper house. And I went to visit him in this house. It had 3 stories and a garden, and we used to go around there for Christmas Day. And it just felt like going to your parents' house or something. And I said to him, "If you ever sell this, let me know. I'll buy it off you." And he lived with my best friend, Claire, who's still my best friend. They were together. They split up. And then he rang me up, he honoured it. And he said, "Look, I'm going to sell this. I'm going to sell the house. I'll give you first refusal." So I went and I looked at it. When it came to it, I just couldn't buy it because it was just normal. All the reasons I thought I wanted it because it was normal.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do it in the end. But I like this area, and cycling back to Shoreditch, I came across a derelict version of his house. In fact, 2 versions of his house back to back. And it had buddleia growing out of it, and it was derelict. The roof had fell in, the boundary wall had collapsed, and it was now being propped up with, it was being protected with corrugated iron, and it had chains on it. It said "keep out." It looked like the haunted house where the Addams family would live. I just thought, what the fuck's this? And it said Hackney Council on it. And I literally, on my push bike, rang the number. Hello, I'm standing outside 121 Mortimer Road. It says "keep out. Can you tell me about this house?" And the bloke sort of laughed down the phone and said it wasn't for sale. It was just derelict, like unloved. No one wanted it. And the bloke said, "Google Mole Man of Hackney." And I'd never heard of the Mole Man of Hackney. And so I went back and I Googled the Mole Man of Hackney, and it opened up this whole, literally, can of worms. And I thought, fuck, now there's a project.
Well, for the people that don't know about the Mole Man of Hackney, tell us about it.
Well, it turns out that there's this crazy guy. He was dead by the time I'd discovered him, and the house was sitting empty. So he was an Irish guy, William Little, and he'd come over from Ireland, and because he had inherited his family home, which was 2 Victorian houses back to back, one on Stamford Road, one on Mortimer Road. And he'd had the house for 40 years. And in that 40 years, he'd entertained himself by doing his own home improvements without planning permission. But I guess if it's home improvements inside the home, who cares? But word had got out that he'd actually tunnelled and dug rooms underneath the building, and then couldn't help himself but go slightly out of the boundary. And so there was rumours, because people didn't quite know what he was doing. There was rumours that he had tunnelled under the road and was going to pop up in, people were terrified he was going to pop up in their back garden. He told somebody he was digging his way to Barclays Bank at Dalston Junction. So he didn't help himself much by, telling people what, rumours and whatever. And the council rerouted the number 76 bus that used to come down Stamford Road from Kingsland Road onto Englefield, and they rerouted it because they were terrified that people standing outside Stamford Road waiting for the bus was going to suddenly disappear into a sinkhole. So I think the rumours got worse of what was actually happening, that he was tunnelling under the road. I don't know how much of this is true, but I'm thank God that the number 76 got rerouted, because that would have been quite annoying, running past my house every day.
True.
And the neighbours were so concerned for the safety of the house that the council had to come up. The council came along and evicted him and put him into social housing, where he started tunnelling again. I think he knocked a wall down. It wasn't even his house. They evicted him. And then they turned up with a concrete mixer, put the hose through the letterbox, and then pressed play, and then filled up the whole of the garden and the tunnels, whatever tunnels they were, with the aerated concrete. And they didn't remove anything. And so by the time I got my hands on the building, the garden was full of concrete. It had half a door sticking out of it. It had agitoprops. It had shopping trolleys. It was almost like Pompeii, where things had been frozen in time and they were surrounded by concrete. So I just found this building and I just became obsessed by it. I just thought, yeah, it's a lovely area, de Beauvoir, but I couldn't live in the normal, twee houses that they'd had. I needed to get my hands on this.
A quick interlude to let you know that there's a house tour to accompany this episode, which is available to insiders on Patreon. Here's a short preview.
My brief to David was, let's make a haunted house.
Oh, really?
Right, yeah. But when the project went on so long, went on for about 5 years, and there was a point where I just went, do you know what? That's enough.
Yeah.
Stop the project. But they cast the hole in the roof for the staircase to go up another level. Okay. So that was already there. And they were like, oh my God, we've got a hole in the roof now. And let's fill it in. And I said, no. Let's put a fuck off skylight up there. And not just that, Can we get one which you can open and close?
Oh, seriously?
Like that. Oh, look, there's an aeroplane going over. So it was in the hands of probate when I found it. And I tracked down they were called air hunters.
What was?
People who had it.
Okay.
He was a probate person, but they had a TV program called The Air Hunters. They're trying to track down the heirs.
I see.
If he had any. I don't think he had any children, but I've had people on Instagram message me and say, I am William Little's nephew or something. People from Ireland. I went to the probate people and I said, I've seen this derelict house. I don't think they took me seriously. They just didn't know who I was and what I could achieve and what I'd done with Dirty House. And I had the money to buy it. And I offered them some money. I offered them £500,000. And they just ignored me. And so I kind of put it to the back of my mind and just, carried on with life, carried on with my divorce. Actually, I think it was pre-divorce, but we'd separated at the time. But carried on with my life, really. And then a friend of mine sent me an article. She said, a house you've been going on about. Popped up in auction. It's about a year later. And so I went back down the rabbit hole and went to the auction. And I was terrified of bidding on it because I thought I'm not going to be able to stop myself. I worked out how much my limit was. I worked out it's 2 houses. I knew how much one house in de Beauvoir was worth, and I'm buying 2. But I also knew what state it was in and how much money I was probably going to have to spend doing it up. So I had a limit. And I asked my art dealer at the time, who was Harry Blaine, who's used to sitting in auctions and bidding on Picassos.
Yeah.
I said, will you bid on this house for me? I'll come with you. And he was in a suit, and he was taken seriously, a man in a suit, And so I wrote on the catalogue what my limit was.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, we were in a bidding battle with someone else. I don't know who it was, but but it went up and it just went under my my limit, and we got it. And when we walked out, he got hounded by the press, not me. I nipped off through the back door down the pub. I said, see you at the pub on the corner. They're all saying to him, what are you going to do with you've got what, like this, all this press and that. And it was quite funny.
That's hilarious.
Like, what are you going to do with it?
Well,
of course, he hadn't got a clue what to say. No comment.
Well, on the subject of what you're going to do with it, I mean, it's amazing what you have done with it because you, rather than just get rid of everything that the Mole Man was about, you've sort of preserved parts of it. You showed me around, and we'll make that tour available to people on Patreon. But it's fascinating because you can see it's very archaeological, isn't it? You got the layers of history. You can still see bits of the concrete, random things sticking out of it.
Yeah. I was very adamant that I wanted to keep the 4 walls.
Yeah.
With all their nooks, with all their holes and all their pieces of steel propping out of it, nails in the wall, Mole Man marks. The marks of history, if you like. There was lots of graffiti and whatever. I was very adamant I wanted to keep the windows as well. I mean, my builder said to me, we'll take it down brick by brick and rebuild it.
Yeah.
And it'll be cheaper. And I was like, nah, what's the point of that? I wanted to preserve the history for future generations for eccentricity reasons, if you like, from one eccentric to another. And it took an eccentric woman to buy this property and to see the beauty in it and to preserve it. Because now I get dads coming by on push bikes with their kids telling them about the Mole Man and telling them about the story and the house. And that wouldn't exist if a property developer would have got their hands on it. They just would have demolished it, and then they would have built it to the edges of the boundary and sold it off for as much money as they could.
Yeah,
I think it's important to preserve these little these little moments of history, for future generations. Really,
you've made an incredible place here, and I think what's amazing about it is that it supports every aspect of your life. We're in your studio here, but it's also a home for you and your 5-year-old son, Spider. How has being a mum changed things for you? Because you were telling me earlier you were 52 years old when you gave birth, which is miraculous. Just tell me a little bit about that.
I think it goes on. I think, women are having babies later in life. Yeah. I think they're reversing that cliche where it's not just left for men. I mean, men can reproduce it ad infinitum until their 80s, if they're lucky enough. But women are told that they can't. We have a biological clock. But technology moves on and we're able to hopefully define the rules. It's been a prerequisite of my life, really, to try and defy the rules. So it's just another one to add to the list, I think, of an achievement, really.
So presumably you did IVF, did you? Because you're a single mum, right?
Yeah, but I know the father. Yeah,
okay.
The father was an ex-boyfriend of mine.
Okay.
And he agreed to father the child, so I know who the father is. Good-looking lad.
Nicely done.
I'm still in touch with him and his mother. Yeah, so it was very important for me to not, it's not picked out of a catalogue, if you like. Yeah, it's definitely a Webster child.
But it's brave to undertake that on your own. Were you adamant that you wanted to be a mum?
I mean, I'm financially successful.
Yeah.
I can afford to do it. I had a terrible miscarriage with Tim. We met at art school. We had we fell into this rock and roll career. We didn't talk about having a family. It's not until later in life that sort of urge came over me I became pregnant in my 40s with Tim. And it was towards the end of our relationship. And I thought, oh, this is it. This is going to happen, And I was midterm when I lost the child. I had to give birth to a baby that died inside of me from it wasn't meant to be. And it sent me down and it spiraled me off again into a black hole. And, I was splitting up with Tim at the time. And I just thought, I had a word with myself and I thought, I'm not going to go to that dark place again. So the only way that I can save my life, and it was really, I had to save my life, was in order to then make a mission to reverse what had happened to me and to actually have a child, to give birth to a child. And so it became a project, it became a mission, and I had to do it in order to save myself. I knew that from what I was, from the black hole that I was capable of getting into before. I thought, I'm going down that hole again. I can't let it happen to me twice. So yeah, it became a thing, and it saved my life, and it's changed my life. I mean, I'm still making art. I've got plenty of ammunition for my art now, and you'll see it in my new work. It's all about defying the rules again. Yes, and I've made that into my paintings. Here I am, a defiant woman in her 50s who's able to give birth. Yeah.
Well, we're surrounded by those portraits here. They are really super powerful. And you were saying to me earlier that there's one of them that you painted 10 times.
I'm on the 10th version, yeah.
You're on the 10th version, and it's a picture of you pregnant with your leather jacket on, with your Susie and the Banshees badges and so on.
Yeah.
Why that image? Why paint that one?
It should be in the National Portrait Gallery, and it should sit along portraits of presidents, I think, because it is, maybe they don't realise it yet, how important this image is of a woman who is, defiantly pregnant in her 50s, and that it's possible to, I had a career. You get to a certain age in your 30s where you've got to start, the time bomb is ticking away inside of you. And I just thought it wasn't going to be possible, and it is. It totally is. And as technology moves so fast these days, women will be able to have, if the womb is still capable, women will still be able to have children into the 60s, I would say.
Yeah.
So it's a defining moment in time, not just for myself, but just for women in general. I think there's a message out there to say that, yes, it is possible to have a career and still think about having a child if that urge doesn't reach you until later in life. Wait, the urge didn't hit me until later in life. I want a baby. I'm going to do something about it. Do you know what I mean? I ain't going to let the rules stop me.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I'm wearing the jacket that takes you back to the youth of this person that had overcome, a difficult adolescent and found a saviour, if you like, in the music of Susie the Banshees and in the role model of its lead singer, Susie Sue. She helped me through a difficult adolescence, and I've kind of revisited that as an adult to help me get through another difficult period of my life, but this time as a muse to my work.
So interesting. The one just behind me here with the boxing gloves on. So you with boxing gloves on, are you a boxer then?
Yeah. So I down in Shoreditch, there's a great gym, Paragon Gym, run by two brothers that are kickboxing champions. And so I had that thing where I had these friends that said, come on, let's go and learn how to kickbox. And my friend sort of left town and moved out of London. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to go to that gym. I think exercise is a great form of therapy. I swim a lot and just having that thing, I think repetition helps the brain as well. It's like a mantra. So boxing is quite a repetitive, especially in training. I used to be very good on the speedball. I used to drive everyone insane at the gym. But yeah, I joined the gym, and for 12 years, right up until COVID and Spider was born, I boxed at my gym. I learned to box and kickbox. So I'm a brown belt. I just missed out on my black belt. I can still go back, I guess. But I mean, I guess having I take Spider there now. Spider's really good because he's little and he can jump up and give me a left hook. Yeah, an uppercut.
So is there anything else apart from the boxing and the swimming that you do overtly, to kind of keep your head in the right spot?
Well, I have a place in the country. That absolutely is worth its weight in gold. Just getting in a car and leaving London behind when it gets all too much. Tim was from Stroud. I'd never been to. That is like old England in a way. It's the rolling hills. It's beautiful landscape. I'd never seen anything like it. I guess I was born and brought up in Leicester and moved to Nottingham and blah blah blah. Yeah, I'd never been to such a beautiful place. And when we had enough money, we bought a small holding in Stroud. And during the divorce, I kept it. Just going there to clear my head, walking through the woods, letting the wind. It's on a point where it's really high up, where the weather, when it builds up and it comes across the Atlantic from America and it gets sucked up the Bristol Channel. And the highest point it hits is the Slad Valley up there. So you get the really strong winds that ripple through. Tim and I used to own 40 acres of woodland right next door, and you could hear it rippling through the trees like the Mexican wave. And, I walk up there in a strong wind, the wind that you lean into.
Yeah.
It's that kind of wind, and it just blows the cobwebs out.
Yeah. So that does it.
It's been worth its weight in gold. So I'm hoping to build a studio down there, so I can spend more time down there.
Yeah. Be amazing. Well, let's see. My last question for you is one that I usually ask. This building.
Yeah.
It's not only an iconic piece of architecture. It's also your home. It's your family home. How do you put your finger on what this place means to you in your life? What does it represent to you? How important is it to you?
But there's nothing like designing your own space. I just couldn't live in someone else's footprint, so I'm lucky enough to have done it more than once, where I just designed it's like I designed the life I want to live, and I'm designing the space that I want to live in. I just couldn't do it any other way.
Well, I'm really interested in what you told me about your upbringing and your father building a place, but also your family heritage in general. It's really clear where that impulse comes from.
Yeah.
So it's really helped me make sense of a lot of it now.
Did you lay awake at night wondering?
Yeah, you know me.
I wonder why. Where's it come from?
Yeah. It's been a total joy. So I've, as you know, I'm a massive admirer of what you do, not only as an artist, but also, not to blow too much smoke up your ass, but you've created two, I think, really important buildings. And I really hope that they will both be here forever. I think they're moments in time. That place in Shoreditch, as you said, it sort of defined the whole area.
Yes.
And I think this mole house, I think, again, it goes a bit further than just being a house. I think it represents something. And I love this idea that you said that it represents a sort of eccentricity, a kind of outsider energy somehow, and that you see yourself a bit in him. So yeah, thank you so much.
I'm a hoarder. Oh my God, yeah, like him, yeah. But it's like, I can't throw anything away. I've now made it into art. Well, always.
Thank you, Sue.
It's a wrap.